Good afternoon. My name is Marta Elvira. I'm a professor of managing people in organizations at IESE Business School, and it is my privilege to interview today Marina Gorbis, who serves as Executive Director of the Institute for the Future, a premier futures research and consulting organization based in California's Silicon Valley. We just discovered that we both are graduates from UC Berkeley.
Go Bears.
Go Bears! We have that in common and a real faithfulness to our school, to our alma mater. And now today we are here because in the World Business Forum, where IESE Business School is a sponsor, Ms. Gorbis has just done a presentation about megatrends. And I'd like to ask precisely about these key trends that, in your opinion, and with your expertise and knowledge in the Institute for the Future, will shape the future of business in the next 5 to 10 years. What are those key trends?
So I think one of the most important trends is that we're changing the way we're organizing to create value. So for the past 40 years, we've been putting in place a new technology infrastructure that basically allowed us to go from centralized ways of communicating to highly decentralized, distributed modes of communication. And usually, when we put together an infrastructure, we create the infrastructure. Marshall McLuhan said, we develop our tools, and thereafter our tools evolve us, change us. So for the last 40 years, we've been putting together this new infrastructure. And for the next 40 years, these tools are going to be reinventing us. So I think that's the most profound transformation that will affect every aspect of our society. It will affect education, it will affect health, it will affect energy, it will affect business. All of that is going to change. And we can see some signs of this happening already, where people are now able to create and produce value outside of institutional structures. And we see a lot of that, particularly in Silicon Valley, but we can also see it in Europe and other places in the world. Wikipedia is, in a way, such a product where it was produced completely outside of institutional boundaries. It relies mainly on volunteers to provide content, and it's an incredible resource. So it's both a disruptive and also it's a trend that provides a lot of opportunities.
I understand that you're writing a book about socialstructing that seems related to the trend you're describing. Could you share some insights of what you're going to write about?
So I use the term socialstructing to mean that we're going to organize around our social connections rather than against them. So in a lot of our production system over the last 100 years, we actually tried to imitate machines. So humans were trained to specialize in certain areas, and we use terms like efficiency and productivity, which we basically use for machines, right? So we're part of these big production machines where we served a certain function, and we had to work like that's why we say it works like a machine. That means it works beautifully, it's efficient, it's productive, and all of that. I think what's going to happen is increasingly those kind of routine operations will be taken over by smart machines. So everything that can be decoded, that's rote, that's repetitive, can be done by machines. So what's left for us humans? Everything that's emotional, that's social, that machines can't do, at least for now. So the new way of organizing, actually, we look at our social assets. So people, your social network actually matters. How many people you can reach, how many people, if you tweet, how many people will retweet your tweet. So all these social assets become very important in the new structure. So everything that's repetitive and rote and can be decoded and optimized will be done by machines. So I think that what we humans will have to bring is social, emotional, all these other things that in a lot of organizations up until now, it was considered, don't bring personal into work, don't bring social, this is not a social place. It doesn't mean that it wasn't operating socially, but it wasn't looked on as an asset. And now these social skills and social ties become a huge asset.
As a professor of leading people in organizations, of course, I'm particularly interested in that topic because we do think, and at IESE's business school, the mission states that people come first. And I think that we try to live up to that beyond the cliches. So what would you say are the organizational competencies that are required to change and shift these structures in order to accommodate a humane-centered or a human-centered organization?
We actually just did a research project on the future skills, on the skills for the future, looking at 2020, and we identify 10 critical work skills for the future. So I'm not going to go through all 10, but some of them. The first one is sense-making. So when you have all this data and all this information coming from so many sources, the critical skill becomes to making sense out of it. So understand what's a larger pattern, what should you be paying attention to, what should you just let go. So it's a big, we used to call it critical thinking skill, and we call it sense making, making sense out of tremendous amounts of data and being able to understand patterns and stories in that data. Another skill that I think is very important for anybody in the organization is computational thinking. And it doesn't mean that people need to learn to program. Some people will, and I think that's a useful skill. But it's ability to work with, to represent events and objects and interactions as data, and to be able to work with data. So that's kind of another skill. Another skill that I think is important is being persuasive in different media. So we know how to be persuasive orally, and we know how to write in text, but there are a whole new media evolving, like video. So how are you persuasive in media? In video, how are you persuasive in social media, on Twitter? What does it take? Or Facebook? All of these. So being kind of persuasive and fluent in multiple media.
Is there any other trend that you would like to share with us, just to wrap up, that we may have ignored in the questions?
I think that along the same lines as we are reorganizing how we produce value using these new technology platforms and tools, is we're reorganizing how we think about energy and provision of water and resources. So all of those were also supplied in a very centralized way. And I think increasingly we will be able to create local energy sources, local clean water, locally use small, portable, lightweight devices, rather than to build out a very heavy infrastructure.
Well, thank you very much for sharing with us your insights and your time. It's been very illuminating.
Thank you.